Hello, everybody. It's Yolie Medina talking about the Kohberger case again. And this time I'm going to talk about the DNA, the issues with the DNA in this Kohberger case. And I'm just going to go by the transcript of the closed hearing that was made available, but it's redacted. Because I'm just going to stick to the transcript of that hearing. So I have a lot of questions, but for the most part, I'm just going to focus on the main questions that I have. And let me share the screen so I can start. Okay. Now, this is Brett Payne's testimony. He is allegedly the lead investigator at the Moscow Police Department that was in charge of this case. So he says, the first time I heard Brian Kohberger's name was December 19th, 2022. Question, and what was that a result of? Answer, that was a result of investigative genetic genealogy that was being undertaken by the FBI. We had a phone call that evening and we were told Brian Kohberger's name. And before that, Mr. Kohberger was not on your radar. No, ma'am. So December 19th is the first time that Brett Payne heard Brian Kohberger's name as a possible person that was involved in the crime or a suspect. So then I'm going to go to page 18. So he's being asked by Ann Taylor, the defense attorney, all right, you had pursued interviews and surveillance video. Had you pursued evidence found inside the scene at 1122 King? Yes, ma'am. Question. What efforts did you make to pursue unknown male B? Answer. You have to be more specific. I don't remember exactly where unknown male B came from. Question. If I told you the lab report showed unknown male B came from a blood spot on the handrail going between the second and the first floor, does that help jog your memory? Answer. Yes, ma'am. Question. Why did you not pursue that person? Answer. At that point in time, we had already received Mr. Kohberger's name, and from what my understanding was, entering another DNA profile into CODIS would remove the previous one we had from the knife sheath. So if memory serves, the discussion was we'll hold off. We'll stay with the one from the knife sheath. If we need to, we can address the unknown male B at a later time. Okay. And she says, I want to make sure I understand your testimony. Were you not aware of unknown male B until after December 19th when you knew Brian Kohberger's name? No, ma'am, I was aware of that before, yes. How about unknown male D? Answer, again, you're going to have to be more specific. If I told you unknown male D came from a lab report from a sample of blood on some gloves outside the house, does that refresh your recollection? Yes, ma'am, it does. You're aware of that too? Yes, ma'am. So there was DNA from unknown males that came from the handrail of the stairs, and it's between the first and second floor, and it was not tested. Well, it had to have been tested because how would they know it's a male? So some kind of testing had to have been done. And that's the question that I have, like how this DNA or blood that was on the handrail, how did they know it was male? They had to have done testing. What kind of testing did they do? So that I have a question about. And then also too, the sample on the gloves outside the house that had blood, or actually the blood sample that that they took from the gloves outside the house, how did they determine that it was an unknown male? They had to have testing. So my question is, what kind of testing would they have done to determine that it's an unknown male, DNA of blood, which is distinctly different from finding skin cells on a knife sheath? My understanding is the skin cells are smaller than a speck of dust. So that's my question. Now, I'm going to go to the testimony of Ms. Noling. She was part of the forensic lab staff, I believe. Let me go to page 58. Okay, and here we're going to talk about the trash pull, where they took the trash, where the FBI traveled all the way over to Pennsylvania and surveilled Bryan Kohberger and watched him go to CVS. They watched him jog around the neighborhood, and then they did a trash pull for the home of Bryan Kohberger's parents. So apparently it's a gated community, and apparently we learned from the hearings that the FBI asked the trash man to get trash for them. And so the trash man picked up the trash that was located outside of the home of Bryan Kohberger, and they took it to the FBI who were outside of the gated community. That's my understanding. I don't know. That's my understanding. So let me just read this testimony by Miss Nolan. Question: in the case we are here for today, do you recall there being a trash pull? And the court reporter says, I'm sorry, there being a what? Ms. Taylor, a trash pull. The witness: I recall receiving evidence from a trash pull, correct? What role did you have in deciding anything about that trash pull? Answer: nothing about the trash pull occurring. I do recall there being a brief. I can't remember if it was on the phone, and if it was a phone meeting or a video meeting, and just being asked in general what items from someone's trash are good for DNA. Question: did you give advice? Answer: I don't know if it was me specifically or another member of our DNA unit, but we did offer suggestions on items that are good for DNA. Question: did you receive items to test? Answer: yes. Question: what instructions were you given about those items? Answer: the discussion was a person of interest had been developed, and to analyze the items from the trash to determine if they could be inclusive of the DNA profile that was developed from the knife sheath, unknown male A. Question: what date was that you received the trash? The trash was received into the laboratory on December 28th. Question: so you were looking for a male profile? Answer: correct. Question: all right, did you find the male profiles? A. Answer: I didn't perform the actual testing, but yes, there were male profiles developed. How many? Answer: I don't know. Do you know anything about either male profile or any of them? Answer: I believe one of the male profiles designated as E was determined they could be a biological parent or child of the profile from the knife sheath. So it could be a biological parent or a child. So the next question I have is, what trash did they test out of the trash pool? There were items, but what were they? I mean, this is something that I would like to know, and that I probably would have asked, because I'm curious. Anyway, this is where, now, remember that Brett Payne said the first time he heard of Bryan Kohberger's name was on December 19th, and that was from the FBI? Okay, so here's Ms. Nolan's testimony. Question: are you aware that Bryan Kohberger's DNA was in the trash? Answer: I was not aware. Question: did you become aware? Answer: I became aware later. We didn't have his name at that time. Question. You didn't know his name on December 28th? No, I did not. Okay, so this lab person, she's testifying. She didn't do the studies, but she does remember the trash coming in. But it seems like I would think that if it was a collective unit where they're investigating a case, that the forensic lab people would know the name of Brian Kohberger because it was disclosed to the lead detective on December 19th. I don't know. I just think that's strange. And I also, again, would like to know, well, if they did get Brian Kohberger's DNA from the trash, then what's this with the whole father thing? I mean, they mention it that the father, I don't know, it's very confusing because it looks like they did get Brian Kohberger's DNA in the trash. Why couldn't they just test all the DNA to the sheath? Why did they? Because they didn't finish or what? I mean, I think what they did was they tested it and they said, "Oh my God, this is a match. This is the father. The trash shows that it's a father of the person who left the DNA on the knife sheath." Anyway, very convoluted. I don't know, but going around getting trash pulls, I don't know. It all sounds strange to me, but I don't know about police investigations. These are just questions that I have. Now I'm going to go to the Idaho State Police Forensics Lab Director, Mr. Gamet. Let me go there. It's page 96. So just as a background, Othram Lab was the lab that the skin cells on the knife sheath were taken to so that they could do some kind of forensic genetic genealogy to find out who the suspect could be based on that. So he was asked, question, was this the first case that Othram worked pursuant to that contract? Because apparently there was a contract between the Idaho State Police and Othram. Answer, no, I don't believe so. How did they get the DNA? And Ms. Taylor's referring to the DNA on the knife sheath, the transferred DNA on the knife sheath. Answer, the DNA sample itself? Question mark. That DNA sample was delivered by Moscow Police Department in person to them at Othram Labs. Question, did you have any role in that part? Answer, I did. Question, what did you do? I accompanied the officer from Boise down to Houston and down to the Othram laboratory. I didn't have possession of the sample, but I was with the investigator that did. Okay. Who was the investigator? I mean, I didn't see a name, and maybe I'm missing it, but the fact that they would actually take this DNA, I don't know how they got there. It was by plane, I'm assuming plane. Like, what is it? How do those skin cells get transferred on a plane to Othram? And I'm genuinely curious because I have a hard time visualizing it. And I think a jury would, if this comes into evidence, a jury would have a hard time. Like, what? You transferred some of the cells because it wasn't all of the cells, I don't think. How was it transferred? Like, what are the guidelines for transferring DNA on a plane or on a car, or what is, like, I'm so ignorant about this stuff that I would like to know. So those are the questions that I have. And there was also another question I had. Let me see. Let me see if I can find it. Ah, here it is. Okay. So this is the other question I have. I'm just going to read the testimony and then talk about it. Question, and I know you don't recall exactly where the knife sheath was swabbed, but we've been talking about policies. Do your policies or best practices suggest where a knife sheath or an item like that should be swabbed for DNA? No. It would be impossible for our analytical methods to cover how to swab or where to swab every single item of evidence. We receive quite a wide variety of items into the laboratory. So it's analyst's job as a scientist, as a practitioner in forensic biology screening and DNA analysis to know what they're targeting. So on this item, I believe there was also blood. So they would have been targeting that separate and then also trying to determine who may have handled that. So they would have specifically honed in on an area that whoever handled it would have had to have touched and maybe touched repeatedly. And why do they hone in on those areas in particular? Answer, because the question we are trying to answer, and this is a question that the forensics lab is trying to answer. In forensic DNA analysis, the question we're trying to answer is, can we link the assailant to the victim to the assailant, or one or both to the scene? So in this instance, my understanding, the sheath was found at the scene. So trying to link the possible perpetrator to the scene. See, I understand that the knife sheath was at the scene, but it's a movable object, number one. Number two, the cells that were left there, I don't know how many cells there were, but they're tinier than a speck of dust, is my understanding. So I would think that they would want some DNA under the fingernails, of the victims, or something. DNA, I don't know, something more than skin cells on a knife sheath. And it was taken from the button snap of the knife sheath. So skin cells on a button snap of a K-bar knife sheath that is a movable object, I mean, we don't know. I mean, he could have handled that knife sheath at a knife show, or there was a knife show earlier, I understand, before these unalivings. So I don't know. It just seems to have such a hard stance on the death penalty in the case that really the only thing that links him, at least in my opinion, is the DNA on the knife sheath. Suppose he touched a knife that somebody else had, and he opened up the button. I mean, was it there at the scene? I don't think you can time when those specks of skin cells were left on the knife sheath. So those are my opinions, and it's based on the transcript. And I mean, really, it's just one of these things where I'm just curious. I'm very curious. So I hope to find answers when the trial comes, or maybe sooner. But this case is troubling. So in any event, right now, the way I see it is there's reasonable doubt. There was DNA, blood DNA, which is better than skin cells, in the house, on the handrail, and outside on a glove. Now, when you think about the OJ case, there was a glove outside his house. It wasn't even outside the crime scene. This glove was outside of OJ's house. And that glove was the center of everything. If it doesn't fit, you quit. And so I'm having a hard time thinking that a glove with blood on it found outside the house is not relevant to test. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. And if anybody knows the answers to the questions I'm asking, let me know, because I'm really uneducated when it comes to this whole investigative genetic genealogy. And it's just a bunch of question marks for me, especially how it was transferred. I'd like to know how the skin cells are transferred. Are they on a slide, like a pathology slide, or are they refrigerated? I mean, I don't know. Anywho, I'm rambling now, so I will talk to you guys on the next video.